So volume check. Does this sound right? Too loud? Or just right? Just right. Okay. It always feels very loud to me. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to spend time with you. The plan is that we have 45 minutes for me to talk, and then 15 minutes for Q&A. So be thinking of questions as I'm going along, and I'm really excited to spend time with your kids tomorrow. I will tell you that I am not giving this presentation to them. There is a little overlap, and I'll tell you when we get to that part. But really what I'm talking with them about is stress reduction. And what I would love for you to ask them is, what is one thing you learned about how to reduce your stress? Because what I want to tell them is, we're going to talk a little bit about this during my presentation, but what I want to give them are just nuggets that they can take away. I really cannot stand to go to a talk and leave and be like, I'm inspired, but I don't know what to do now. So I'm hoping that if you ask your kid, what is one thing you can do, one new thing that you can start doing, or a small tweak that you can make, that will create some good conversation for you all. And I'll show you the part that overlaps. Okay, but tonight, you and I are talking about this concept of failure. And actually, I'll go back. As you can see from my book title, 8 setbacks that can make a child a success. And the subtitle is, What to Do and What to Say When to Turn Failures into Character-Building Moments. My publisher and I really went back and forth on this word, failure. I wanted failure, all caps, like on the title. And she said, that is a word parents don't like. It makes them really itchy. I think we should make it smaller. Let's maybe move it to the subtitle. In fact, let's put it in quotes. And then maybe that'll help parents feel better about this. But really my goal with this book is to change the way we culturally think about failure. For me, failure is one of the most important things that a child can experience on their journey to becoming an adult. I want them to fail often. And what matters most is how we react. There are ways that we react that will keep kids sort of stuck there in that failure, and there are ways that we can react that will turn that failure into a launch pad for more growth. So we're going to talk about what we can do to become comfortable with the word, comfortable with the concept, and then know what to do when our kids experience a setback or a failure or a faceplant or whatever word you are comfortable with is okay by me. So we're going to start with this concept of impression management. And it's not my concept, it's Erving Goffman, who's a sociologist, who created this. And his thinking is that impression management is the way that we perform for various audiences. So we make an impression on people, and we change our performance depending on who we're in front of. So when I'm here in front of you, I'm hoping to make a certain professional impression. I hope to be likable. I hope to make you laugh a little bit. I hope you learn something. And I'm acting a certain way. I'm performing for you. When I'm having drinks with my girlfriends, I'm performing a little bit differently. When my kids have friends over at the house, I'm performing a little bit differently than I do otherwise. So I'm always changing my performance and trying to create a different impression depending upon the audience I'm in front of. That's really basic. What we need to know about impression management is that it's not just about being people-pleasing. It's not just about making ourselves feel good. Impression management is one of the biggest tools that we have for learning who we are. And it's one of the biggest tools our kids have for learning who they are. So they are switching it up in front of their teachers, in front of their friends, in front of you, and they're getting feedback. And based on that feedback, they're learning what kind of person they are. So if I tell a joke at a party and it bombs, I get feedback. And I say, oh, I probably shouldn't tell that joke anymore. It's actually not very funny. So feedback can be negative and it can be helpful, or maybe I do something really helpful for my husband and he sends me a text and says, oh, thank you so much for running the garbage out. I forgot to do that. You're the best wife. And I say, I've learned something really important here. I'm the best wife. So we're getting feedback all the time, and that is really valuable to us. The way that we react to our kids' setbacks and our kids' failures is part of how they figure out who they are in the world. So it's really important that we be good audiences to them as they fail, and that we don't try to keep them from failing, because we need to teach them something about how they fail. So we need to witness it, we need to be willing to see it, and we have to have a reaction that helps them grow. Very important. I want to quickly define how I'm thinking about failure and how I'm thinking about success, so we can all kind of be on the same page for this conversation. So I love data and I love research, but my concepts here for failure are much more sort of human development and growth related. Failure for me is when an adolescent feels unmoored or unattached, when they feel like they are unaccepted or incapable, especially incapable of being a valuable contributor, and when they question their self-worth. So, not grades, not making the team, even though those will come up, and they do come up in the book. I'm really looking at failure as these kinds of categories. And then when I think about success, again, I'm not thinking about you had the best time at the track meet or you had the highest grade in the class. What I'm looking for are just a few things for the child. Does the child feel a sense of personal fulfillment in their life? Are they doing things that make them feel like, I'm doing stuff that's keeping me engaged and happy? That's good. Do they feel like they are developing competency in an area of interest? Are they getting good at something, but not just getting good at something? Are they getting good at something that they really enjoy? That's a hard one for us to wrap our brains around. So that might look like your kid is spending a lot of time learning how to do a really good eyeliner on YouTube. And you think, like, how much time can you possibly put into this? Why does it matter? It really is a sort of cornerstone for building the feeling of success that kids can play off of, that they feel like, I love doing this and I'm good at it. That's so cool that I'm good at doing something that I really enjoy. And finally, that they have a community in which to participate and that they can contribute something of value to that community. So maybe they're doing people's eyeliner before the dance, right? Or, as my husband used to say, he played baseball in high school. And when our kids started playing sports, my kids are now 22 and 24, but when they were playing sports at around middle school, through high school, he used to tell them this story. He would say, I was never the best player on the baseball team, never. So I knew in order to make a contribution, I had to figure out what I was really good at, and I was really good at being a teammate. So I would cheer people on. I was so good at rallying kids, getting them excited before the game. I knew that that was my role, and that was my best contribution to the team. I was like a great hype man. So figure out what you're really good at, and go give that to your community, whatever it might be. So we have to let kids figure out what it is, and it may seem to us like that's not science or math or technology, but if it to them feels like it's an opportunity to make a contribution, that feels like success to a kid. So that's how I'm thinking about these concepts as I was doing my research for this book. These are, in the book, these are different titles, and I call them the crew. They are archetypes that I came up with that represent 8 different kinds of failure that teens and tweens most experience. So I have this Facebook group online, and there are like 13,000 members. They're from all over the U.S. and all over the world. And I was talking to them about what kind of experiences their kids were having that were uncomfortable, embarrassing, caused them regret, to feel shame, that kind of thing. And they shared them with me, and these were the top 8 that I sort of pulled together. And then I gave them each an archetype. So the rebel is the person who fails to follow the rules. And that can vary based on their age. So maybe that's, maybe your kid isn't coming home in time for curfew. They're a little bit older. Maybe they're younger, and you have a no shoes in the house rule, and they just fight you on it every single time they want it. So they are rebelling against the rules. The daredevil has a failure to take care of their body. So again, for a younger kid, maybe it's that they refuse to wear a helmet when they're skateboarding. For an older kid, maybe they're starting to drink on the weekends and you're getting scared about some of that behavior. The misfit, this is really the academic misfit. This is the kid who feels like, I don't get why everybody else is doing well in school. I'm just not keeping up, and I don't understand what's so different about me. The ego shows a failure to show concern for others. That's every teenager at multiple points. And that actually brings me to an important point. You may recognize your child in more than one of these, and you may say, oh, we were this, and now it's becoming this, and sort of, it's very fluid. The loner fails to connect with their peers, so that's a kid who's really struggling socially to make social connections with kids their own age. The sensitive one has a failure to cope with their emotions. They are just overwhelmed and overburdened by what they're feeling. The black sheep has a failure to get along with their family. So it's similar to the loner, but for the loner, they often get along really well with their family, and their parents sometimes sub in like friends, and they do social things together, but they're struggling to find friends at school. The black sheep often really doesn't feel like they fit in with their family. My whole family likes to do X, and I only want to do Y, or my whole family believes this, or my whole family thinks my sister's the greatest, and I'm not. But they have a great group of friends at school. They are very peer-driven. So that's the black sheep. And then the bench warmer has a failure to believe in themselves. So that's a kid who sometimes it comes out of the blue. I write about, in the book, I interviewed 29 families who had experiences with these failures. And the one who I interviewed for the bench warmer was a family where the son was a swimmer and a really good swimmer. And in 8th grade, his younger sister, his body was really changing, as bodies do in 8th grade. And he'd gained a lot of weight, but it was swimming great. And his younger sister came up to him at a swim meet in front of everyone and poked her finger into his belly and made a joke. And that was it for him. He was just like, I'm not swimming anymore. I'm done. You can't make me. So he just had a crisis of confidence. So all of these things are things that are very normal and typical. They happen a lot. The way that we react is what's going to help our kids get through them. So we're going to talk about that. First, I need to talk about the paths that your child can be on in life. If I were to say to you, if I knew you the moment you first met your child, and I said to you, you can choose one of these 3 paths for your child. They can be on the easy path, the uncomfortable path, or the traumatic path. Here's what the easy path sounds like. Your child is a really good sleeper as a baby, and they're on a schedule almost immediately, and you're just loving those early years, and then they start preschool, and they're a little teary when they say goodbye to you, and then they go into preschool, and they're delighted at the end of the day, and they tell you funny stories about the friends they made and the things they're doing. They go to elementary school. Their teachers say they are a joy to have in class. They are curious. They make a lot of friends. They love being with you at home. They follow the rules. They go to middle school, and they maintain those friends from elementary school, and they add new friends in middle school. And they're able to juggle different classes. They find that kind of fun and interesting. They like growing up and becoming more independent. They go to high school. They have their first relationship. It's lovely. It ends amicably, and they get into the first college of their choice. So that's the easy path. I do not have to describe the traumatic path for you. You know what that is. No one's going to choose the traumatic path. And then there's the uncomfortable path. Your kid's fussy. You have a really hard time with sleeping and eating schedule early on, but you finally work your way through that. They go to preschool. They're a biter, so you're getting a lot of notes about that. And then they go to elementary school, and they do pretty well in elementary school, and they make some friends. There's a little bit of birthday party exclusion. And then they go to middle school, and suddenly they're iced out by their elementary school friends. And so they are alone in middle school, and they have to figure out who they are going to sit with at lunch. And those years are really tough, and there are a lot of tears. And then they go to high school, and they try out for the school musical, and they don't get in. And then they try out for a drama club, and they do get in. And then they have a relationship, and it's really exciting, and you think it's very sweet, and then they break up, and your child is heartbroken, and you worry something is really wrong because they don't leave their room for weeks, and they're crying a lot. And then they have to apply to college, and they're excited about going to college, and they don't get into their first choice or their second choice, but they get into their third choice. So those are your choices for your child's path in life. Most people I know, if I met you, without retrospect, if I met you when you were meeting your child, would say, give me the easy one. That sounds amazing. I'll take it. I want all of your kids to be on the uncomfortable path. I really want them to be squarely in the middle, and this is why. For about 5 decades, Marty Seligman is a psychologist who studied feelings of discomfort in human beings and in animals. I'm going to talk about the human side of things. So he studied what is our reaction to failure, to feeling pain, to feeling discomfort, and he wanted to learn more about that. So for 5 decades, loads and loads of experiments. I'm going to tell you about one. He took college students and he put them in 3 different groups, so A, B, and C. A group, one at a time, he put a college student into a room, closed the door, and played a sound that was just ear-piercing, awful noise. On the wall in that room was a button. So the student could go up to the button and press it, and nothing happened, and then press it again, and nothing happened, 3 times, 4 times. On the 4th time, the noise stopped. So they were totally relieved. And then after a minute, the door would open, and they would be told to go to the back of the line. So one by one, A group goes in. They hear this noise. They're freaked out. They don't know what to do. They hate it. They press the button, and eventually it stops after 4 times. B group, those people, same thing, one at a time, get sent into a different room. Same noise, same button, but the button has been disabled. So B group goes in, and they press the button, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they give up. So they just stand there and wait for someone to come get them out of the room in extreme discomfort. And then C group is sort of a control, so they have a room and they have no noise, so they just stand in there until someone says, okay, come on out. So that's the first phase of the experiment. Then they loop it again, but this time it's a different room. Everyone in group A, the group that pushed the button 4 times and got the noise to stop, everyone in group A is put into a new room. There's a different noise. It's terrible, and there's no button, but there is a lever on the wall, on a different wall, that moves back and forth. Everyone in group A goes into that room, the sound starts, and they go to the lever, and they start working on it. Everyone in group B goes into the room, hears the noise, sees the lever, and waits for someone to come let them out. They have learned very quickly not to try because nothing works. So they wait with the ear-piercing noise until someone comes and lets them out. The third group, half of them kind of mess around and figure it out with the lever. They have the lever this time, and so they hear the noise, they have the lever, and half of them are just like, I don't understand what to do here. What we know from that experiment is validated by loads of other experiments that he did, but it's this concept of learned helplessness, that our natural response is, if we don't find a pretty quick way to feel better facing pain or discomfort, we are going to grin and bear it. So we need lots of opportunities to learn when something hurts, when something doesn't feel good, when something makes me uncomfortable, I can do something. And it doesn't really matter what you do. It doesn't have to be a perfect answer. And it doesn't even have to be the same thing. It doesn't have to be, I had a button before, so I need a button now. Our brains understand that if we took action on the button, maybe moving the lever will work, because that worked for us the first time. But if you've had an experience where you have suffered, where you've had pain and discomfort, where you could not figure out a way to make it stop, then your natural response to that is, there is no way to make pain stop and discomfort stop. So if I feel shame or embarrassment or regret, I just need to hunker down until it finally goes away. What I want is for your kid to be on that middle path so that they get lots of micro moments of not getting invited to the birthday party and feeling embarrassed about not knowing where to sit at lunch and being put in a class with no previous friends in that class, all of these things, getting a grade that they thought that they didn't deserve, not making the team, so that over and over and over and over, you have the opportunity to say to them, that's awful, that's painful, I am so sorry, what can you do? What is one thing you could do to maybe make yourself feel a little bit better right here? So I want to give them tons of opportunity for that. I think of this like a metaphor, and I call it greenhouse parenting. So you've heard of tiger parenting and helicopter parenting, and they're all kind of branding for all kinds of parenting. Mine is greenhouse parenting. So greenhouse keepers create a greenhouse that has a perfect environment. The soil is rich and beautiful. The air is set to the perfect temperature. It's not windy. It's just the ideal spot for a teeny, weak little plant to begin to grow. And they nurture that plant in that perfect environment until one very cold day, they take the plant outside and they expose it to really uncomfortably cold temperature. And the plant hates it and it shrivels up. It does not like feeling bad. And then they pull the plant back into the greenhouse and they let it recover. And the plant gets stronger incrementally over time until it's time to take the plant and put it in the earth outside of the greenhouse. I want you all to be greenhouse parents. So it is not your job to make life hard for your kids. I've had parents ask, should I, wake my kid up to work out before school? Should I do these things? No. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it's not your job to make life hard. Life is automatically going to do that for you. Your job is to keep your environment really nurturing and really loving, and then to open the door and to let your kid go out in the world and make mistakes and be embarrassed and feel regret and do things that make them uncomfortable, and welcome them back into your greenhouse and say, that was tough. That was really hard. But you did it. You did it. And let's talk about what you can do now to feel a little bit better. So that's greenhouse parenting. I'm going to tell you what that looks like, the part about what can you do to look better. That comes a little bit later. But right now, this is sort of breaking news. I added this into my slideshow about a month ago. And this is the part that I will talk to your kids about tomorrow. There was a survey that just came out through the Harvard School of Health and Common Sense Media and one other group, I think Indiana University. And they asked teens what were the most stressful things in their lives. So according to that poll, these ranked as the 6 most stressful things that teens experience. So I want you to look at this and just think in your head, which one of these do you think is the most stressful for kids? What did kids say most often of these 6 was most stressful to them? Think about that, and I'll reveal the answer here. The answer is game plan. It's having a game plan. So you'll notice that there are 3 of these, game plan, achievement, and activism, that have a little asterisk next to them. Those are the ones that were identified as most having to do with the adults in their lives. So a game plan, for example, is on a small scale, what are you doing about homecoming? Have you asked somebody to go to homecoming yet? It's getting late. People already have dates. Have you figured out homecoming? What's your ride for the blah, blah, blah? Have you done, figured out your project? And then, of course, on a bigger level, well, what are you doing to get stuff on your resume for college? You have to join a club. You have to volunteer. How are you thinking about that? What's your game plan? What if you don't get into that school? Then what will you do? We as I did this all the time. We're list makers, and we're checking things off the list constantly. And so often our conversations with our kids are just drills. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So that, for teens, was the most stressful thing in their lives, having to account for game plan, followed by achievement, which is, pressure that can come internally, can come from other kids, but mostly comes from adults. What are you doing? What are you getting good at? Where are you, what are your grades? Where are you going to go to school? That kind of stuff. Appearance is how they view themselves. Social life is pressure to be involved in social groups. And then friendship is pressure to manage the sort of dynamics of changing friendships as they're getting older. And then activism surprised me. So that's sort of pressure to find a cause and to be active and to be a change maker in the world, even at their age. So I'm sharing this with you because I'm sharing it with them. I think it's interesting, and I think it's just one of those things that we need to note. How often am I asking these kinds of questions? Knowing that this is one of the things that causes kids to really internalize stress. Maybe if you're like, I think I probably ask about it every other day. Maybe you can dial that back a little bit more. Maybe you can say, when is a good time to talk about this? Rather than just they come in the door and you're like, oh, hey, you're here. Good, I've been meaning to ask. Have you turned in that paper? Or whatever it might be. So I'm saying that to you because that is something we are going to talk about tomorrow. And as we're talking about stress, and you and I are talking tonight about failures and what we can do as adults to help kids pass that, the way we talk about these things is really important to how they feel they can sort of keep pushing the button or not. The way that I came to this concept of failure was sort of through a side door. I really wanted to write about coming of age. I was really interested in how different societies and different cultures across time and geography have ushered kids across the threshold from childhood to adulthood. I find that fascinating. And so that's what I wanted to do, but what I realized while I was doing it is that a key component of that for every culture across all time is letting kids fail. So I'm going to share with you what a rite of passage really is. For many of us, a rite of passage, sort of a coming of age, involves passing of time. So, okay, you're 13, you can have a smartphone. You're 15, you can get your permit. You're 16, you can have the keys to the car. You could have a big party at this age, whatever it might be. So we think of rite of passage now, culturally, usually as sort of earning some privilege. Really, a rite of passage is based on this concept. A child separates from their group. This is not my concept. This is Arnold van Gennep. It's hundreds of years old, but it's been around forever because it's a universal truth. A child separates from their group. They experience some kind of a test because they're individuating. They are away from their parents or their friends or their community in some way. So they're tested. And because they are alone, even if they're in a group, they might be alone mentally, they might be thinking differently than other people, or they're actually physically alone, they make some bad choices. They learn and grow as a result of that. And then they reintegrate to their group a better version of themselves. So that's good for the kid who's becoming an adult, and it's great for the community who welcomes the kid back after they screwed up and says, well, we have this great new community member who's really grown up. What a cool kid. So I'm going to share with you, first, let me tell you this. We know this to be true in terms of our culture. Every great TV show or book that you have loved about a teenager follows this pattern. The kid separates from a group. They have to fight some kind of a battle on their own. They screw up and they learn from that lesson, and then they go back to their community where they are all better for it. So we know this culturally. We know this in our hearts. You may know this academically. If you studied sociology or psychology or religion in college, then you may be familiar with some of these texts which talk about this sort of rite of passage component. So we get it that way. We get it academically, and we get it culturally and in our hearts. Where we do not get it is in our homes. We have a very hard time accepting that this age-old process will work for our kid, even though it's worked for kids across the world forever. It's very uncomfortable to think about opening the door to the greenhouse when you've worked so hard to make it so good there, and let them go out and screw up and learn from screwing up. So we are not comfortable with that. I want to quickly share with you my coming of age story, my rite of passage. When I was 16, I grew up in Boston, and so I attended a private school in Boston, and you could apply to go to the mountain school in Vershire, Vermont for a semester. And if you went to the mountain school, you worked on the farm. You went to school 6 days a week for half days, and then you worked on the farm for the other half. And it was academically rigorous, and it was physically very rigorous, and it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. So super excited. I loved that I was accepted. It was fun, and every 2 weeks, chores would rotate. So you might, in addition to your farm work and in addition to your schoolwork, you might have to scrub bathrooms in the morning, or you might have to, feed an animal, or, fix a pen, whatever it was that your chore was. I landed turkey feeding duty for 2 weeks. So this is in the middle of Vermont, in the middle of winter, and my job was to wake up at 5 a.m. and go out, put my biggest coat on in the dark, go to Turkey Hill, trudge up Turkey Hill, fill a bucket with grain, scatter it over the hill for the turkeys to eat, go back and get ready for my day. And I did that for about a week, and then I was very tired and very cold and very 16 years old. And one morning I slept in, and then I didn't feed the turkeys, and I got up to go to breakfast, and then I went to class, and then I went and did my farm stuff after that. That was like digging potatoes or whatever it was. And I went to bed that night and no one said anything to me. And I was like, huh, all right, good. I got some extra sleep. I'm kind of psyched that I got away with that. The next morning, I planned to get up. It was so cold. And I was so tired from all of the hard work. And I was still 16 years old. And I slept in day 2. And so I got up and I was nervous and I went to breakfast and no one said anything. And I did my school stuff and I did my farm stuff and I went to bed and I thought, I don't think turkeys need to eat as much as they're telling me. Like, I'm getting away with this crime and it's incredible. I just was so young and so, like, I just wasn't thinking. The next morning, I hope I would have gotten up to feed the turkeys. I'll never know, because the door to our dorm flew open, banged against the wall, and the farm manager came into the lobby and started screaming my name at the top of his lungs. Everyone came out from their room, just bleary-eyed, like, what is going on? And he's screaming my name. I knew why he was screaming my name. And he just, in front of everyone, said, what is wrong with you? How could you do this? You're not feeding the turkeys. How do you think everybody else can go about doing their chores and contributing to the community, and you don't have to pull your own weight? I don't understand what's going on. What were you thinking? And I'm like, everyone's looking at me, and I'm mortified. I just felt so embarrassed. And he said, do you know how I know that you weren't feeding the turkeys? And I said, no. And he said, because turkeys become cannibalistic when you don't feed them. Before you hate me, they were getting curious. They had not, it didn't go like, it wasn't a Donner Party, but it was gonna end up that way. I mean, my heart fell into my stomach. I just was so upset. And then he said, everybody do your chores. And he left. So I got dressed and I went up and I fed the turkeys on Turkey Hill and I went about my day. Because it was a farm and the pace of the day was rigorous, there wasn't a lot of time for people to ask me about it or to talk about it. It was like a move right along situation. The farm manager did the best possible thing. First, he did what he should have done, which was to call me out on it, right? Those are living things that were relying on me, so I fully appreciate that he had to put an end to that. The thing that he did that I am grateful for to this day is he never brought it up again. So when it was time to switch chores, he very easily could have pinned up the new chores on the cork board, and when everybody gathered around to see what their new chore was, he could have said, now, Michelle, you're going to do your chore this time, right? I don't want to have to come looking for you. Right? He did not press the bruise. He just put up the chore and expected me to do it, and I did it. Had he not done that, had he made a bigger deal about it, I would have called my parents. I know myself. I would have called my parents and said, I don't belong here. There's something wrong with me. I don't fit in. And they would have been like, what has happened? So I would have had to tell them why they had to come pull me out of this program. And then they would have been so freaked out that I didn't feed the turkeys that I know they would have brought me back home, and then they would have been like, well, we need to watch her feed the cat from now on. Like, we need to hover over her and make sure she's not a sociopath, and like, what's wrong with her? None of that happened. My parents never knew that I didn't feed the turkeys. They never found out, but I knew. So my coming of age story followed the pattern. I separated from my group. I went to the mountain school. I experienced a time of being tested, chore duty. I failed that test. Then I learned something and grew as a result of failing that test. And what I learned was, even though it feels really good to be self-indulgent, it does not feel good to be self-indulgent when other people are relying on you. And I learned that at age 16. And then I returned to my school back in Boston, where my family and my friends knew nothing about the turkeys, but I was a better person because of it. It was an amazing school. We studied Thoreau, we did orienteering, I conjugated the plus parfait in French, like a lot of stuff that I don't remember right now. I couldn't tell you a thing that I learned academically. But this thing that I learned is so valuable to me. So we have to give kids the opportunity to fail, to screw up, even in ways that are not good for the people around them. And then we have to give them space where we aren't pressing on that bruise, so that they can figure out what that feels like. If we're always trying to tell them what it should feel like, that they should feel regret, if we're always trying to make sure they learned the lesson, they're not going to learn the lesson. So it's actually easy and hard at the same time. It's easy. You just sit back and let them have the feelings and be okay with them having the feelings. And that's really hard to do at the same time. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to this. When you are working with or you have a child who is experiencing a failure or a setback, sometimes you won't know about it, like the turkeys, and sometimes you'll know. You'll see it, or your kid will be acting differently, or whatever it is. These are 3 steps that work no matter what the failure is. So all of those archetypes that I showed you earlier, the failure to connect with friends and the failure to believe in themselves, the failure to take care of their physical body, all of those things will work with these 3 steps. So they are contain, resolve, and evolve. And the way I want you to think about these is as though it is a tennis game. So contain, the ball is on your side of the court. That means you've noticed something is going on. Maybe you notice that your kid is experimenting with drinking, and so the world has suddenly gotten too big for them, and you need to contain by making their world smaller, and that might mean containing the child. That could sound like the world's gotten real big real fast for you, and I'm nervous about your safety, so you're going to stay home this weekend until we come up with a plan for what we're going to do about this. That's you. You are containment. The next step is resolve. So the ball bounces from your side of the court to your kid's side of the court. In the book, 8 Setbacks, there's a menu of things that your kid can do. This is where your child learns to press the button. So your child feels a feeling that is uncomfortable. Maybe, like I said, they need to be contained, or maybe something's happening that is no fault of their own, not a decision they've made. Maybe they're getting messages from someone online that are really hurtful. So maybe your containment is, we need to put up some technical boundaries here, and I know this feels really bad for you. What is something that you can do? Again, there's a long list. What is something you can do to move forward, to feel a little bit better? So some examples would be, depending on the kind of issue that you're dealing with, maybe they need to make an apology. Maybe they need to make amends for something they did wrong. Maybe they did nothing wrong, but they're just not educated on a certain topic, and they need to learn a little bit more about it. Maybe they need to have a discussion with you on a certain topic. Maybe they need to come up with some consequences. Maybe they need to reach out and make plans with somebody new because somebody who they usually hang out with isn't available to them anymore. So it doesn't really matter what it is. I would spend 0 time thinking about whether it's the right or perfect solution to how they feel. All that matters is their brain starts to build this muscle that says, when I feel uncomfortable, I don't pull the covers over my head for too long. A little bit's okay. But I don't just go in and pull the covers over my head and wait for somebody else to fix it. I do one thing. Maybe I need to take a walk and drink a lot of water, right? Doesn't matter. You have to do something. So that's on their side of the court. You can't do that for them. You can't go into that room and press the button. You can't email the teacher and try to fix it, or call the other parent and say, hey, they're feeling really left out. Can you coordinate this so that they're not feeling left out? This is for them. The ball is on their side of the court because, again, they might not get it right, but what matters is they're practicing. They're practicing how to deal with their own discomfort. And then the ball bounces back to your side of the court again for evolve. And what that means is you have to, at some point, put this behind you. You have to become the farm manager. And you have to say, okay, that was tough. That was really uncomfortable. Anyone would have felt really bad about what happened there. You did a really great thing. You took some responsibility for it, or you learned more about it, or you took good care of yourself while you were feeling bad. I'm really proud of you. And now let's put it in the rearview mirror. We don't have to keep talking about it. That's such a gift to your child. There are 2 kinds of failure where I see parents have the hardest time with this. One is failure to connect with their peers. That's a heartbreaking thing to see and to feel as a parent. But it is made worse when you press on that bruise by continuing to ask them, even in the nicest, most lighthearted way, hey, how about that girl in math class you mentioned? She seemed really nice. Have you reached out to her yet? When you do that, it sounds friendly, but you are pressing on a bruise for your child. So you have to just let that be after a while. And the other one is failure to take care of their body. So if your child has endangered their physical being in some way, it's really hard every time they leave to not shout out, please don't let me get another phone call like I got, right? That is so scary, but at a certain point you have to say, okay, that was hard and we're going to put it behind us. And what is likely to happen, what may happen, is it happens again. But it's very hard for anyone to learn the first time through, right? It's really a difficult thing to be an expert after one mistake. So that's okay. If it happens again, you rinse and repeat. You say, okay, let's contain again. Things got real big real fast after another month, so let's contain. And now let's talk about resolve. What can you do this time? Maybe it's a little bit different. And then we're going to move past it eventually again. So that's the process that works for all of these. And when we think back to impression management from the beginning, that kind of reaction, less emotion, more, all right, this is a part of life. We're going to figure it out. It's not good, but we're going to figure it out. What can you do? How can I support you? And let's move right along, is the best message your child can get when they screw up. That doesn't tell them, I'm a failure, I'm a bad person, I'm the kind of person who always makes this mistake. It just tells them, okay, here's a little feedback, right? And now we can move on. I'm going to zoom ahead to the end. Well, I'm going to put this up here just because I interviewed, as I mentioned, lots of parents in the book. And these are things that they shared that were really helpful that other parents did when their child was struggling. And creating a sense of community around failure is so important to that rite of passage, completing that. The kid comes back and people welcome them. That is the most amazing thing. So this is in the book. It's also here. Sometimes people take a photo of it or something. But it's just really nice things that you can do for another parent if they are struggling. And I think it's a great way to think about community building. Sometimes when a kid messes up, they become, parents think, oh, I should keep my kid away from that kid. They've made a bad choice. And then that can just make it worse and worse. And I understand sometimes containment might mean that you aren't hanging out right now. But there are still ways that you can convey that that child is going to be okay. All right, so there's that. These are ways that we can stay in touch. So all the obvious ways. Instagram. If you're interested in joining that Facebook group I mentioned, it's a private Facebook group. It's called Less Stressed Parents, not middle school, Less Stressed Parents. We've changed the name. And then this is the book. So if you have questions about anything that I talked about tonight, or you just want me to tell you how to get your kid to wear deodorant, we can go in that direction too. I get that one a lot. So anything you want to ask is fair game. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good question. So if you have younger kids or just a kid who's like, I don't want to do this, right? Which is pretty likely too, that you might have an older kid who's like, oh, I'm too embarrassed to apologize, or I'm just not going to do that. What can you do to help them start to learn to press the button so that later it gets easier? Break it down into something much smaller. So if they're unable or unwilling to say I'm sorry or to apologize, if that's, an option that you think would be a good one for what has happened, what has gone wrong, then maybe it's let's write a letter and we don't have to send it. Or maybe it's just maybe you could say it to me, what you think you should say, and then when you're ready, if you're ready, you can go say it to the other person. So I think just putting less stakes on it for the child still gives them practice, right? They've learned how to put the words together that they need to say, and when they're ready, they'll be able to say it. But I would just, again, it doesn't really matter what they do. Maybe it's, You need to draw, I don't know how old the kids are, but draw a picture of what you think would help this other person feel better, or what would help you feel better if you're the kid who got hurt. Don't struggle to try to find the perfect or right answer. All that matters is that they do something. So even if they're not willing to apologize, maybe they go to their sibling and say, you can use my Xbox controller, whatever it is. So it's just a nice action instead of that. I think there are lots of ways that they can sort of build that muscle, even though they might feel resistant to it. But ask them, if we dial this back, what would you be comfortable with? That's a really good question. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about the sort of coming of age, the four squares, and how that works.
Yeah.
What is the conflict with how that works in a world where we expect perfection from a young adult? The first type example is in a classroom where you don't turn in the assignments.
Mm-hmm.
You give a second chance. What does that mean? Coming of age, you make a mistake, or you're embarrassed, or you're one of those 8 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's on social media.
Yep.
So
it feels like the stakes are higher, right? Parents often feel like because it's on social media, it's permanent record, stakes are higher. To our kids, I don't think it feels that way. It can feel like, ooh, that was a real moment that was magnified, but it doesn't feel like it does to us. So I want us to be careful about not conflating how they feel about things being on social media and how we feel about things being on social media. I think we perceive that really differently than they do. And I do think, just to put you at ease, I don't think college admissions officers are really doing deep dives into your kids' social media. I do want them to be cautious. I don't want them to be sent something by somebody else. But it's not as scary as people make it out to be, I think, in terms of permanent record, that sort of thing. Having said that, your question is, given the sort of like rite of passage, how do we allow them?
Yeah, you framed it that way, and I see a lot less opportunity for my son or my daughter has failed in whatever in
Yeah.
the classroom, and maybe aren't getting a second chance in that. Like we're expecting them to be perfect on social media.
Yeah.
If you're not able to fail, let's say you fail at home because you listen to
Your nice greenhouse, yeah.
I just wonder how we manage that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of...
I've seen it where my son had a terrible failure this week.
Yeah.
And I did what he did. I said, what can you do about it? Went into the teacher, and he did get it.
Awesome.
He also had it where he hasn't had it.
Yeah.
So...
And that's the kind of thing that, like, we really don't have control over. So often I'll say to kids, when they're upset about something, boy, you can spin your wheels forever trying to fix other people, trying to make them have the same rules you have, trying to make them have the same expectations you have, trying to make them feel the same way as you do about certain things. But if you spend all of your energy trying to fix the way other people set themselves up, have their rules, whatever their classroom criteria is or whatever, it's exhausting. So all you can do is say, okay, given the circumstances, whether it's a school assignment or whether it's the way a friend made you feel. Little kids often get into this thing of like, it's not fair that these girls are doing this at lunch and I don't want them to do that anymore, so I want to make it so that they can't do that anymore. And I'll always say, like, people can do what they want to do. What we have to work on is how that makes you feel. If it makes you feel jealous, what can you do about that feeling you're having? If it makes you feel angry, what can you do about that feeling you're having? And maybe that's, I got to find some other kids to hang out with. Or maybe it's, I need to let that go. And I think that the paper thing might be that way too. Like some teachers, yes, will say, okay, you're getting a second chance. And some teachers will say, sorry, I was very clear from the beginning. There are no second chances here. And that's kind of it. And so then the working from there is like, what am I going to do with this now? And I've got to figure out what I'm going to do so that I continue to try hard. in the other classes so that I know that if I press the button, something will happen. And maybe that I love the email or that going and meeting with the teacher and asking. But if no's the answer, then no's the answer. And you say, okay, well, I tried. At least I did something. I tried. I think that's great. Yes. Yep.
And this could be, so I'm talking about like youth sports or friends or whatever it is that you might see them like try again, and it's not maybe working out.
Yes.
And you want them to have the grit and you want them to keep giving effort. But at what point do you kind of go,
yeah, that doesn't seem like a fit for you. You keep trying to make those kids like you, but you're not. Yeah.
take away their confidence or their
Yeah.
ability to want to keep trying, but then, you know, you see what
I
I'm
totally see what you're saying. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about with the kids tomorrow. So broadly, I call the adolescent years the buffet of life because you're figuring out your identity, who you are, who you want to be friends with, how you present yourself to the world, what kind of clothes you want to wear, blah, 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 blah. So you're not, those things were chosen for you by your parents until adolescence. You pick their friends, you pick their activities, you laid out their clothes, and now they have to start making all of these decisions on their own. So I say to kids, belly up to the buffet and try things, and if you like it, you can have more, and if you don't, move right along. It's great to quit. Like, you have to quit a lot of things when you are going through adolescence, because if you fill up your plate with orange chicken and someone says to you, you can't try anything else until you finish the orange chicken, you don't get to explore all the things that you might love in the world. So I encourage quitting. I know there are caveats around that, like we paid for this thing or the team needs you this weekend. That's different. But generally speaking, I think it is really good for kids to give something a try, decide if it's a yes or a no, and move right along without feeling badly at all that they tried. I'm going to talk about that with them tomorrow, and this idea of like being open to reinventing yourself a lot is really healthy for you. And then I'm trying to think, there was something else that you said specific to... Oh, so if you see that your kid is trying something that isn't a fit, my feeling is it is better for them to realize that on their own or to get a peer response than to get a response from the greenhouse keeper that says, this isn't working, kid. You know, you got to try something else. I don't want you to ever damage their confidence in that way, and it is far more effective to get peer feedback. Eventually, someone's going to say something. It's not comfortable, but a peer will eventually say something, or they will just have a realization like, oh, it's way more fun to talk to these people over here. I was so busy trying over here, I didn't realize. That will happen naturally. You don't need to say a word. Yeah. It's a relief, really, that you shouldn't. Yeah. Sure. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, hi. Like the Michael Jordan didn't make his basketball team thing. There are many that are sort of cliched that people tell a lot. I don't, because I think the ones that rise to popularity are like, at this point, we all kind of know them. I think the myth for me that I'm most interested in is that how many hours does Malcolm Gladwell say you have to practice something until you're an expert? Is it 10,000? That's a myth. Like, that I think is silly. And so I don't think we should be telling kids, like, you need to specialize. You need to try this. So you're going to fail until you get 10,000 hours or 15,000 or whatever. It's not true. I want to encourage kids to be generalists. I want them to belly up to the buffet. I want them to try a bunch of things. And I want them to find something that brings them joy and fun and fulfillment and where they can make a contribution, whether that feels like, they don't need to be Tiger Woods. Maybe they just really love hitting a golf ball around, or maybe they, whatever it is, they should be playing and having that lack of specialty, in my opinion. So that's the myth that I'd like to bust. Well, again, I think I'm more of I don't buy into it. I don't, oh, you guys might not like this one. I don't believe in the wait till 8th movement, the wait till 8th grade movement for phones, because I think it's different for different families. I think that, like, it's far more complicated than saying just technology is making our kids really anxious or making them really upset. I think it's so nuanced that to say, and that's sort of a coming of age thing because it's a rite of passage. Parents will say, end of 8th grade, here's your phone, right? And then, ta-da, you can handle it now. You're finally old enough. It gives a lot of parents permission to not mentor their kids along the way, to just be like, I heard this was the right time, so here you go. And I think that that's where I find it like a little bit frustrating. I'm more of a, mentor, teach. I think of things like phones. It's a tool, like any other tool that you teach your kid. And so you do it like you would teach them how to use a knife in the kitchen. At first, you're holding it, right? You have your hand over the handle of the knife as they try to cut an apple. And then you're watching them cut the apple, and you're standing back, and then you're in the other room one day when they're cutting the apple. And so it's this kind of slow, steady training that I like so much more than treating a rite of passage as like, golden age, here you go, golden ticket, goodbye. Keys to the car, access to the phone, whatever it might be. That's a really interesting question. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
I'm curious about what would you say, thinking about what
Yeah.
you have family or friends that are pushing through.
Yep.
Or their friends. And so how do you respond to them when you see, because that happens, it's part of our culture.
Right.
And so how do you respond when you see that just happening, whether it's a grandparent? So anyway.
Yeah, if you can preempt it, that's the best, because you don't want it to happen in front of the child. So like you're all getting together, you could be like, hey, listen, I know you've been so concerned about blah, 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 blah. I want you to know that we have told our kid that we're putting it behind us. We're not going to bring it up and talk about it. We don't want anybody to do that. I know you want to check in, but you know what they really want to talk to you about? You have to give them something else. Because if you just say, don't talk about this, they're going to go, so you have to say, but what they really want to talk about is that they ask them what they did at their soccer game, right? And give them something to say. If it's like a grandparent, if it's kids, if it's other, people, then you have to say it in the car when everybody's in the car together. You can just be like, hey, you know what? That sucks, but we're putting it behind us. I don't think it helps to keep thinking about it. So let's, be ready to change it. Don't let it sit like a heavy weight there. Just be like, let's change it up. I'll be DJ. Tell me what song you want to hear. We'll switch the combo to something else. But have a replacement and then just say, we put it behind us. We're not talking about it. Doesn't help. Good. All right. If you have another question, I'll be here. Otherwise, I'm excited to meet your little people tomorrow. They're big. They're teenagers, but still. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Michelle.